In 2018, she was hailed as the next Janis Joplin, a shy girl with a voice that stunned the world in seconds. But just a few years later, everything came crashing down, and almost no one saw it coming. After millions of views, major record label offers, and a fan base that stretched around the globe, her life took a shocking turn, one she never wanted the world to see. Behind the cameras, Courtney faced battles that had nothing to do with music, and what she recently revealed left fans speechless. For millions, the name Courtney Hadwin conjures up a memory seared into pop culture, a shy British teenager trembling on stage, seconds away from changing her life forever. It was 2018 when Courtney auditioned for America's Got Talent, stepping into the blinding spotlight with nerves etched across her face. But the moment the music began, everything changed. The crowd's murmurs fell silent as Courtney unleashed a voice so raw, so electrifying, it felt as though Janis Joplin herself had been resurrected. Her raspy growl, bluesy soul, and fearless stage presence instantly stunned the judges and the world. That audition video would rack up millions of views in days, with Simon Cowell himself describing her as unbelievable. Yet behind the viral fame, few knew the intense personal struggles that Courtney carried with her. Her rise to overnight fame was not a fairy tale, but a whirlwind of pressure, scrutiny, and expectation. As social media showered her with praise, it also opened the floodgates to criticism, comparisons, and relentless speculation. At just 14, Courtney was thrust into an industry that can be as unforgiving as it is glamorous. Some called her the next big thing. Others whispered doubts about her unconventional voice and style. And all the while, behind the scenes, Courtney and her family tried to navigate the brutal, unfiltered reality of sudden global fame. But what happened next would make that whirlwind look like a gentle breeze. Because after the cameras stopped rolling, after the standing ovations faded, Courtney Hadwin's story took a heartbreaking turn. Few expected the twists that lay ahead, the disappointments, the betrayals, and the devastating silence that followed her moment in the spotlight. What really happened to the girl with the golden buzzer? Why did she disappear from the public eye? And how did her dreams get tangled in the dark side of the music industry? The truth is far stranger and more tragic than anyone imagined. Over the next 10 parts, we'll uncover the untold story of Courtney Hadwin, the meteoric rise, the crushing fall, and the heartbreaking fight for her voice, her art, and herself. Courtney's audition on America's Got Talent wasn't just impressive, it was historic. As Howie Mandel slammed the golden buzzer, gold confetti rained down, and the arena erupted with thunderous applause. It was the kind of moment musicians dream of, a ticket straight to the live shows, global exposure, and the start of what many assumed would be a glittering career. But for Courtney, it wasn't just about fame, it was about validation. A young girl from Hartlepool, England, who had spent her childhood battling anxiety, stage fright, and relentless bullying, finally had proof that her voice mattered. Yet that glittering confetti would soon feel more like golden shackles. Behind the scenes, the pressure mounted at an alarming rate. Agents, labels, and media outlets all wanted a piece of Courtney. Offers poured in, and so did the demands. She was told to rehearse endlessly, polish her image, and be ready for press appearances and interviews. But no one seemed to care that Courtney was still just a teenager, grappling with immense anxiety and self-doubt. The industry's relentless machine didn't pause for her mental health. If anything, it steamrolled over it. As Courtney advanced through the competition, the world watched with bated breath. But few saw the cracks forming beneath the surface. Her soulful, gravelly voice may have echoed confidence, but off-stage, Courtney's struggles deepened. She began to buckle under the weight of expectation, battling not only the music industry's pressures, but the lingering effects of anxiety, that had plagued her long before America's Got Talent. And as the live shows approached, those around her began to realize this overnight success came at an unbearable price. At first glance, Courtney Hadwin's rapid ascent to stardom seemed like the ultimate success story. Headlines proclaimed her the next Janis Joplin and rock's newest prodigy. Television segments, talk shows, and viral videos cemented her place as a global sensation. But beneath the surface, the very fame that lifted Courtney onto the world stage was quietly eroding her peace of mind. The spotlight didn't just illuminate her talent, it magnified every insecurity, flaw, and moment of hesitation. For someone as painfully shy and anxious as Courtney, that glare became unbearable. Behind closed doors, Courtney struggled to reconcile her public image with her private reality. The confident, explosive performer fans adored was often replaced, off stage, by a withdrawn, overwhelmed teenager. Friends and family noticed the toll fame was taking. She became increasingly isolated, retreating from the world as anxiety and self-doubt intensified. Social media, meant to connect her with supporters, instead became a breeding ground for trolls, harsh critiques, and relentless pressure to be perfect. The dream was turning into a nightmare. And then came the contracts. Record deals, management agreements, brand partnerships. The machinery of the entertainment world quickly surrounded her. But beneath the glossy surface of these opportunities lurked a harsh truth. The music industry is not kind to young, vulnerable artists. Legal battles, exploitative clauses, and suffocating creative control crept in. For Courtney, the golden opportunity of act became a gilded cage, locking her into a cycle of exhaustion, anxiety, and disillusionment. And as the public marveled at her talent, few realized that behind the scenes, her world was quietly unraveling. After the final curtain fell on America's Got Talent, the world expected Courtney Hadwin to skyrocket to even greater fame. Fans eagerly anticipated new music, sold-out tours, and television appearances. But as weeks turned to months, Courtney's presence faded from the spotlight. Her social media updates grew sporadic, her public appearances became rare, and the music industry that once couldn't get enough of her suddenly fell silent. Whispers began circulating. Where was Courtney Hadwin? Why had the girl who stunned the world disappeared so abruptly? The truth was far more complicated than fans imagined. Courtney hadn't vanished out of choice. She was locked in a web of contractual obligations, industry politics, and behind-the-scenes battles that left her unable to move forward. Record label executives debated her future while her own artistic vision was pushed to the sidelines. Creative disagreements mounted. The same industry that had promised to nurture her talent now seemed intent on reshaping her into something unrecognizable. For a young artist still trying to understand herself, the pressure was unbearable. Meanwhile, Courtney's mental health deteriorated. The anxiety and self-doubt that had haunted her since childhood returned with full force. Away from the cameras and applause, she faced sleepless nights and an overwhelming fear that her dreams were slipping through her fingers. The young girl who once captivated millions was now fighting a silent, lonely battle, one that few fans ever saw. And while the world waited for her next big moment, Courtney was simply trying to survive. For many, fame is portrayed as a golden ticket, a life of luxury, adoration, and success. But for Courtney Hadwin, fame quickly became a gilded cage. The attention, while intoxicating at first, soon morphed into suffocating isolation. Her once private life became public property. Paparazzi lurked outside her home, fans speculated about her personal struggles, and tabloids churned out rumors about her health, relationships, and future. It was a level of scrutiny no teenager should ever endure. The music industry didn't help. Courtney's team, eager to capitalize on her viral fame, pushed her into projects she wasn't ready for. Recording sessions were rushed, Branding decisions were made without her input. Her raw, bluesy style, the very thing that had captivated audiences, was slowly being polished away. Record executives wanted a product, not an artist. And Courtney, still battling anxiety and struggling to find her voice, felt powerless to resist. Away from the spotlight, Courtney withdrew further. Friends described her as distant, lost in thought, and overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. Family members watched helplessly as she grappled with the darker side of fame. And fans, unaware of the personal turmoil behind the scenes, grew frustrated by her absence, demanding new music and appearances. But few realized that behind the silence was a young woman desperately trying to reclaim her life and her identity in an industry that chews up and spits out even the strongest. As Courtney Hadwin tried to find her footing in the storm of fame, what came next was perhaps the most devastating blow of all. Trusted advisors, people who claimed to have her best interests at heart, began making decisions behind closed doors. Business deals were struck without her full knowledge, and creative choices were made that diluted the authenticity that made her special. Those closest to her realized that the industry Courtney had entered was far more ruthless than they ever imagined. For Courtney, it wasn't just about fighting anxiety anymore. It was about fighting for control of her own life. Friends and family noticed a change. The spark that had once fueled her passion for music dimmed. The vibrant, fearless performer became cautious, even hesitant. Interviews became rare, public appearances awkward. She was no longer the wide-eyed teen with a dream, but a young woman grappling with the harsh realization that the very people meant to protect her had exploited her vulnerability. And while fans speculated about her absence, few understood the heartbreaking reality behind it. The tabloids didn't help. Gossip columns spun stories of diva behavior, creative differences, even allegations of a meltdown. But these were half-truths at best, designed to sell papers, not tell the real story. The truth was simpler and far sadder. Courtney Hadwin had been chewed up by a system built to profit from young talent and discard them just as quickly. The trust she once had in her team and the industry was shattered. And as the dust settled, one question remained. Could Courtney ever find her way back? Not just to music? After what felt like an eternity in the shadows, Courtney Hadwin made a bold, if quiet, decision. She wasn't done yet, but this time, there would be no grand announcements, no carefully scripted comeback orchestrated by executives. The television networks, record labels, and industry gatekeepers had all had their chance, and nearly broken her in the process. This time, her return would be on her terms. But before she could reclaim the spotlight, Courtney faced a far more personal battle, the fight to reclaim her most precious instrument, physically, emotionally, and metaphorically. Years of relentless performances, grueling schedules, anxiety, and emotional strain had taken a toll most fans never saw. Behind the raspy growl and stage presence that had drawn comparisons to rock legends was a young woman struggling with vocal strain, exhaustion, and self-doubt so profound that at times she questioned whether she could ever sing the same way again. For someone whose identity had become inseparable from her voice, the uncertainty was devastating. Some days, the physical pain was overwhelming. Other days, the mental scars whispered cruel doubts in her ear. Could she really return? Or had the industry taken everything from her? But Courtney wasn't ready to give up. Away from the cameras, she quietly assembled a new team. Not the handlers and executives who had once tried to mold her into a pop product, but vocal coaches, medical experts, and therapists who actually cared about her well-being. The process wasn't glamorous. It was slow, grueling, and often frustrating. Rebuilding her voice wasn't just about technique. It was about restoring her confidence, her sense of purpose, and her belief in herself. Friends who caught glimpses of this private struggle described her as determined but cautious, a young woman burned by fame but unwilling to let it define or destroy her forever. And while the physical recovery was difficult, the legal battles proved equally draining. Disputes over ownership of her music, creative control, and lingering contractual obligations loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. But this time, Courtney wasn't facing them alone. Her family, a tight circle of trusted allies, and her fiercely loyal fans stood by her side. It wasn't the glossy, media-fueled comeback the world expected, but maybe it was exactly the one she needed. And as whispers began to circulate, hints of new music, cryptic online posts, the world held its breath. Courtney Hadwin wasn't gone. She was rebuilding, and this time, no one was going to take her voice away. In the digital age, where every moment is documented, every thought tweeted, and every achievement live-streamed, silence is a rare and often unsettling thing. And when it comes from someone like Courtney Hadwin, that silence becomes deafening. The girl who had once stopped the world in its tracks with a voice that defied her age, who lit up stages and dominated headlines, no new songs, no tour announcements, no cryptic social media teasers, just absence. It didn't take long for the rumors to swirl. Fans were confused, tabloids speculated, music insiders whispered about creative clashes, label disputes, personal struggles. She stayed quiet. But behind that quiet exterior, a very different story was unfolding. Far from the polished, superficial world of record labels and PR machines, Courtney had retreated to the only place where she still felt in control, her small, unassuming home studio. It wasn't a multi-million-dollar setup in LA or a label-funded production palace. It was intimate, imperfect, and entirely hers. And within those four walls, something extraordinary, something deeply personal, was taking shape. For the first time in years, music wasn't about fame, contracts, or public expectations. It wasn't about chasing streaming numbers or crafting radio hits. It was about healing, about survival. The songs that slowly emerged from that quiet space were unlike anything the world had heard from Courtney before. Stripped-down acoustic demos, rough, unfiltered vocal takes, melodies tinged with sadness, frustration, but also quiet resilience. Friends who caught early snippets described the music as achingly raw and hauntingly beautiful. Gone were the overproduced pop gloss and industry-mandated formulas. What remained was pure, unvarnished Courtney, a young woman bruised by fame, but rediscovering her voice in its most honest form. It wasn't the product the music executives had tried to mold her into. It was something far more powerful. It was real. But the journey back wasn't smooth. Some days, the fear returned. The paralyzing anxiety, the lingering self-doubt. There were moments when she considered walking away for good, when the weight of the past, the betrayals, the manipulation, the brutal public scrutiny felt unbearable. But every time she picked up her guitar or stepped to the microphone, a little more of that fear dissolved. Slowly, cautiously, she began reclaiming not just her sound, but her sense of self. And then, almost imperceptibly, the world began to notice. A cryptic Instagram post here, a blurry studio shot there, a vague caption that hinted at new beginnings. Fans who had never given up hope flooded the comments with support, excitement, and relief. The girl they thought they'd lost was still here. Wounded, yes, but unbroken. By early 2023, it became clear. Courtney Hadwin was quietly preparing for her return. But this time, it wasn't for record labels or TV producers. It wasn't for viral fame or industry approval. This time, it was for her. Courtney Hadwin's return wasn't the kind of tabloid-fueled comeback the industry loves to churn out. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't plastered across billboards or teased with glossy magazine covers. There was no viral PR campaign, no shock and awe moment carefully crafted by management teams hungry for attention. Instead, it was quiet, it was intentional, and perhaps most importantly, it was entirely hers. After years of near silence, In early 2024, Courtney made her way back to the stage. But this time, the spotlight wasn't forced upon her. She stepped into it by choice. The venue wasn't an arena packed with tens of thousands or a televised awards show designed for ratings. It was small, a tucked-away music club in London, known more for nurturing raw talent than churning out commercial stars. The kind of place where the air hums with authenticity, not expectation. There were no massive LED screens, no pyrotechnics, no elaborate production, just a wooden stage, a simple microphone, and Courtney, but ready in a way she had never been before. For those lucky enough to be there that night, it was clear this wasn't just a gig, it was a statement. The setlist reflected every scar, every hard-won lesson, every moment of doubt that had defined her years away from the spotlight. She opened with stripped-down covers of her musical heroes, not to mimic them, but to honor the parts of herself the industry had tried to bury. Her raspy, blues-soaked voice carried more than just melody now. It carried the weight of survival. Between songs, she shared glimpses of her struggles, the anxiety, the crippling silence that followed her meteoric rise. But woven through it all was a quiet, undeniable strength. What came next was the true revelation. For the first time, Courtney performed her own songs, unfiltered, unpolished, undeniably hers. The lyrics didn't chase trends or commercial approval. They told her story, the loneliness of sudden fame, the anger of being silenced, the slow, painful process of piecing herself back together when the cameras stopped rolling and the world moved on. There were no flashy distractions, just raw vulnerability wrapped in blues, soul, and undeniable grit. The music press, so quick to draw comparisons or stir up controversy in the past, responded differently this time. The reviews were not dripping with sensationalism. There were no lazy headlines about the new Janis Joplin or recycled clickbait about her AGT roots. Instead, critics and fans recognized the truth. This wasn't about recapturing old fame. It wasn't about some desperate comeback attempt. It was about reclamation, about redefining success on her own terms, about showing the world the version of Courtney Hadwin they never truly got to meet, the version free from the industry's chokehold. Behind the scenes, the music industry noticed too. Record labels reached out. Streaming platforms offered lucrative partnerships. Producers, songwriters, and brand managers all wanted a piece of the comeback story. But this time, Courtney didn't jump at the offers. The lessons of her youth, the rushed contracts, the creative silencing, the anxiety-inducing pressure, were burned into her memory, and she had no intention of walking blindly back into that world. Every meeting was approached cautiously, every contract dissected. No more smoke and mirrors, no more letting others shape her sound, her image, or her future. It wasn't about chasing viral moments. It wasn't about topping charts or headlining festivals overnight. It was about building, slowly, intentionally, the kind of career and life that couldn't be ripped away the moment she faltered. Like a craftsman in a workshop, Courtney was assembling her comeback piece by piece, hand-picking collaborators who respected her vision, carefully crafting music that reflected her truth, and most of all, protecting the fragile piece she had fought so hard to reclaim. Her journey wasn't over. It wasn't even fully restarted, but for the first time, it felt real, it felt sustainable, and most importantly, it felt like hers. Because Courtney Hadwin's greatest victory wasn't going viral at 14. It was surviving everything that came after, and finding her way back, not as a packaged product, but as an artist finally in control of her own story. In the end, Courtney Hadwin's story isn't simply about music, fame, or even the dark underbelly of the entertainment industry. It's something far more human and far more devastating. It's about a young woman caught between extraordinary talent and unbearable pressure. A story of survival in a world that often forgets the people behind the performances. Because beneath the viral videos, the standing ovations, and the glitter of overnight stardom was always a teenager grappling with anxiety, fear, and a brutal industry machine that never stops spinning. When Courtney first stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage, the world saw a shy, trembling girl transform into a rock and roll powerhouse before their eyes. Millions watched, mesmerized, as her raw, blues-infused voice echoed through the arena. Headlines compared her to Janis Joplin. Judges declared her a once-in-a-generation talent. But beneath the roaring applause and golden confetti, few understood the full picture. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, or the quiet tears shed backstage. They didn't hear the whispered doubts, the crushing insecurity, or the overwhelming realization that her life had changed forever, and not entirely for the better. What followed wasn't the fairy tale rise that the cameras suggested. It was a painful, complex, and often isolating journey through the harshest corners of the music world. Courtney, still a teenager, found herself caught between record labels eager to mold her into a product, and her own desperate need to protect her identity. The same industry that praised her authenticity now tried to sand down her edges, package her image, and push her into projects that diluted everything that made her special. Behind the scenes, legal battles, restrictive contracts, and creative control struggles became her daily reality. The internet, once the source of her global fame, turned on her with a speed as shocking as her rise. Social media became a battlefield. Trolls, critics, and relentless pressure replaced the praise. Fans who had once championed her grew impatient, speculating, demanding, questioning her absence from the spotlight. And all the while, Courtney was breaking apart. Mentally, emotionally, creatively. The stage that once felt like freedom had become a prison. But what makes Courtney's story so painfully inspiring is that even at her lowest, she refused to disappear entirely. In the shadows, away from the cameras, she fought to rebuild not just her career, but herself, quietly. And without the fanfare of corporate marketing campaigns, Courtney began the painstaking work of healing. She returned to music, but this time on her terms. No choreographed pop anthems, no forced public image, just raw, vulnerable songwriting that reflected her real journey, one marked by heartbreak, anxiety, and defiance. Today, Courtney Hadwin performs not to chase fame, but to reclaim her voice. Her music is stripped down, honest, and deeply personal. Her performances are intimate, her lyrics reflective of someone who has seen both the glittering heights and the darkest corners of public life. The girl, once paralyzed by stage fright, now stands in front of her audience, not as a polished pop product, but as a survivor. A young woman who stared down the music industry machine and refused to be consumed by it. Her story isn't about chart positions or viral videos anymore. It's about resilience, about finding beauty in brokenness, about standing in front of the world, scarred, vulnerable, but unashamed. She's living proof that success isn't always measured by applause or headlines. Sometimes success is found in the quiet courage to keep going, in the determination to create, to express, and to exist on your own terms, no matter how many times the world tries to silence you.